when someone is in a subspace with you, their eyes will switch.
They are so dropped into subspace that their self-agency has somewhat dissipated.
The power play and the seduction.
But it's also just fully giving over
Yeah.
the power and using their boundaries, their desires, and using that against them for my will. It's kind of part of the training.
No, stop, please.
Welcome to Domme Podcast. We are your hosts, Mistress Gemma
And Goddess Seraphyna.
Are you ready to be dommed?
The line between passion and control is thin, and in BDSM, it's one people dare to walk. It is more than a lifestyle. It is an art of trust, control, and release. So what is BDSM? It stands for bondage, discipline, dominance, submission, sadism, and masochism. The acronym became common in the 1990s. The term sadism comes from Marquis de Sade's writing in the late 1700s, which explored intense themes of power and violence. Meanwhile, masochism comes from Leopold von Sacher-Masoch.
Maso?
Masoch. Please forgive us. I know you will correct. He wrote...
We don't need forgiveness.
True, take it as it is. He wrote Venus in Furs about a fantasy of submitting to a dominant partner.
Yeah. So Sado is the one imparting the physical, the pain.
Mm-hmm.
Masochism is the one receiving it.
Mm-hmm.
Although Venus and Fur, I'm curious what others' opinions are, but it is the male writing his fantasies. So is it quite accurate? Because is he seeing it from the lens of what the woman would want or what he would desire?
Topping from the bottom?
Perhaps. I get moments of that from the book, for sure.
So when we say topping from the bottom, that is usually a more dominant bottom that is telling the top how to do their job.
Or we use it sometimes in the terms of submissives who want to be quote unquote submissive, but in my mind are not fully engaging in the act of submission and that power exchange and are really wanting the dominant just to play out their fantasies.
Agreed. How common is it in your practice to meet that archetype?
I would say there are very few people that are truly submissive. And so I think, yes, submissives have their desires and their fantasies, but the true submission that I've come across when we start, of course, we're gauging each other, right? And so I'm understanding their boundaries, their desires, and using that against them for my will. And that's not to say that I'm not engaging in things that I want to do within those bounds. Like ultimately, I will decide what I want to do at any given moment with a consideration and care for them. And I think that's just part of being a dominant as well and a respectable human. And then as time goes on, it shifts to where they just want to please me. And so they are willing to extend themselves and engage in things that they may not choose for themselves, but it is still fulfilling for them just by the act of doing something that makes me smile or gives me pleasure.
They have their lists and, you know, sometimes let's explore that. Sometimes let's take you on a journey, but those things are what builds that submission and that bond and that connection into giving up. And usually I'm assuming it's because of the pushing of boundaries where they go to places where in the fantasies that they have communicated that they didn't think that they'd want to go. It was safe. It was liberating. It was exciting. It was a rush. So,
but it's also just fully giving over
the
power, right?
Yeah.
And that's what a true submissive is seeking.
Doesn't that heighten the submission?
Yeah. It's kind of part of the training
Yes.
in some regards. Yeah.
Oh, I like to train. If we're going to talk about BDSM,
Mm.
we must talk about consent and safety. A critical factor distinguishing BDSM from abusive behavior is the emphasis on informed consent and agreed upon boundaries. The BDSM community often refers to several principles that guide these interactions. You might hear terms like SSC, safe, sane, consensual, or RAC, risk-aware, consensual kink. SSC is about keeping actions informed and responsible, and RAC means participants know and accept any risks involved. There is also a concept called limit consent, coined by the psychoanalyst Avgi Saketapulu, which is about pushing boundaries in a controlled, consensual way for transformative experiences.
Yeah, I find that interesting because the SSC, safe, sane, and consensual, there's some dialogue around that, how BDSM in itself, you can't guarantee it's safe, right? And so I think that's where RAC came in to play, where you're aware of the risk. You can't 100% remove the risk. And so it's going in and knowing and being knowledgeable about how you practice. That came about later on. And then limited consent, I guess, is just saying you can consent to something. In my mind, this is how I'm interpreting it. But there is always inherent risk, and it's agreement to go down that avenue and potentially have something go wrong, and being able to identify it, and hopefully you have that trust and communication and that it can cause harm.
What is your protocol if that space is reached?
A limit, if a limit is pushed?
Yeah.
I mean, just discussing it, really. What more can you do besides discuss it and try to find ways to understand it? I think apologizing should not be beyond a Dom. We're still human, and if a Dom has seriously overstepped a limit or boundary that is very harmful to the submissive, physically, mentally, emotionally, and that is an issue that the submissive brings up, then the Dom does have the responsibility to take the responsibility, identify that, and do what's necessary to remediate. Although, on the other hand, I think submissives should not abuse that as a way to sometimes get more care and nurturance and attention. I've come across where they don't take the responsibility as well with their communication. And I understand sometimes submissives may get into a space where they are so dropped into subspace that perhaps their self-agency has somewhat dissipated, but it comes from both sides. Both have to take equal responsibility. And that just comes from two mature people.
Yes.
Being able to engage in a relationship of any sort.
Yes. And then does this communication happen mid-session, or do you hear that a boundary has been seriously crossed after a session and then the apologies happen?
I've had it both ways, but safe words.
Yes.
There's a reason why those are in place, and you'll explain more about that. And for me, I preface, hey, you have these safe words. When you use a safe word, that means all play stops, and we have a discussion whether we want to move forward or not. I've had submissives that have come to me. I mean, this has happened very rarely. I think there's this once where someone came to me and said, hey, you kind of went beyond, although they did say they were a pain slut. And after it was expressed that it was more intense than they wanted. So there was just a miscommunication. I think there was a lack of understanding on their part of themselves.
Yes.
And I did express that was never my intention. I apologize for going beyond. Also, yes, and that's the reason why you had a safe word. Why did you not communicate with me in that moment?
Do you remember what they said?
They didn't respond. It was over email.
Ah.
So they didn't respond, and I was open to having a dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that felt a bit unfair because I was willing to have an open space
Yes.
for us to remediate.
Yes.
And it was their choice that they didn't want to. So be it.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think that for myself, due to the fact that it has been lifestyle, that I know the people that I'm playing with, their no-goes or their yes, and consent is happening the entire time. When I am getting excited during impact play and want to go harder, you can make it sexy.
And I think that's how it should be.
Okay.
I think also getting feedback.
I love feedback.
Throughout.
Yes.
And some people are just stoic when they're in that space.
I know.
It is definitely much more difficult, but that is part of my inquiry process of, are you emotive or are you more stoic when you're in subspace?
Oh, that's so helpful.
And so then it allows me to understand if they're not giving me feedback, then that's good.
Yes. Yes.
And if they're giving me feedback, hopefully they're using full sentences. So I understand.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And no cannot be a safe word. Or stop.
Yes. No, stop, please. Consent as the cornerstone. Key points for maintaining consent includes pre-scene negotiation, discussing boundaries, interests, limits, and any potential trigger is essential. Many couples or play partners use yes, no, or maybe lists to clarify what they're open to, unsure about, or uninterested in exploring. Ongoing consent. Even in the middle of a scene, consent can be revoked at any time, underscoring the importance of real-time communication and respect for each person's limits.
Yeah, so I think I want to make a clarification there.
Mm-hmm.
When you were saying the negotiation, I guess this yes, no, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
these aren't safe words. These are just, what activities are you into?
Mm-hmm.
How do they land?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you curious or you're like, no, that absolutely not.
Yes.
Granted, keep an open mind, that can shift over time.
Mm-hmm.
And then ongoing consent within a scene, generally that's where a safe word comes in.
Yes. That is that time to ask about their fantasies, what they're interested in, talk about what you would be excited to explore with them, talk about those risks that we were talking about, informing the sub if they are not as experienced, that there could be marks that are left on the body.
Mhm.
How open are you to, permanent scarring?
There are activities that can create permanent scarring, but I think that's a bit more intentional. I think getting to permanent scarring, I have not done unless it was intentionally, I am going to mark you permanently. But that's, of course, also getting the education and the
Mhm.
proper
Mhm.
understanding of certain activities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Aftercare, which we'll have an entire episode on, incredibly important as a sub to provide aftercare for yourself if that's not something that your Dom provides. And then Dom's watching, please, please, please have aftercare for yourself as well.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that I learned that I really needed. It can look differently for anyone. I really love water and the ways in which it helps me release. So I have this beautiful hot tub looking over the city and saunas to relax and release, but have time with your mental and
Physical too.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Now going into safe words. Safe words are going to be different than that yes, no, or maybe. A lot of people use green, yellow, or red. Green to continue, yellow to slow down, and we all know what red means. And again,
It means no for those that don't know. I like to be clear. I'm very explicit about things. There's no confusion because then I could also be like, well, you didn't pay attention.
punishment.
Perhaps.
I think it's needed.
That felt very switchy.
No, I don't know. I'm a believer that punishment should happen if people don't listen. Okay, for the safe words, avoid common words like no or stop. Usually that can be a part of the scene and the play.
Or if there's a specific fantasy, right?
Consensual non-consent.
Even though it's a consensual fantasy, but I don't know if I could say the word, but around sexual assault. So if there's that fantasy, then part of it could be like, no, please stop. Or if there's like kidnapping fantasy.
Or just the forcing into an act, subs will usually.
And sometimes that wrestling is part of the tension and the play.
Yes.
So
it's an energy builder.
And you could absolutely choose your own safe words. Don't choose something that is really difficult to remember or say.
Pomegranates?
I don't think that's too hard.
Really?
Yeah.
What's a
or like
hard one?
superfluous or something.
Oh.
Like imagine you're just like dazed out and you're trying to say that word. Or I don't know.
This makes sense.
Yeah. I do want to go further into when you're talking about top bottom versus dominant and submission and switches. Could you explain what being a switch is?
Yes. A switch is one that both likes to be a top or a bottom, or a dominant and a submissive. I do want to make the difference that you can be a top, bottom, or switch without being a dominant or a submissive.
You could just be into kink activities.
And then a dominant or a submissive that likes to be both, that is a switch as well. So interchangeable for both top and bottoming, or doming and subbing.
So for you personally, where do you fall? Okay, actually, let's back up. I like to view this as like an X and Y axis. Okay. So you've got submission and dominance, top and bottom. So that's the power exchange. And I think that's more of a psychological thing, right? And then you've got bottom and top. And again, as she said, the bottom and top, it's like who's generally imparting the activity on whom. The bottom's receiving, the top is doing the activity. So you have these 4 quadrants. You can be completely a bottom without having the power dynamics, or a top, as you said. And so, for example, if you are peering into someone's window saying you're being a creepy peeping Tom, because that's your thing, a voyeur, hopefully consensually, and you see, let's say, a man spanking a woman, then immediately you're going to be like, oh, he's the dominant generally. That's where we stereotypically go. Like, she's submissive, he's dominant. But it could be the case that she is dominant and she is telling her submissive, I want you to spank me. And so in that case, he would be a service top, or what we would call a service top. So you can't just determine who's dominant or submissive based on an activity. Maybe you could pick it up in the energy and the tones and like the way that they are communicating with each other. But I don't think it's fair to ever make an assumption in which way a dynamic goes, or even if there is a dynamic involved. I think service tops tend to be submissive. Who's doing it in service of the person they're doing it to. So I'm curious, where do you fall on that quadrant of switching in your personal life?
I think that each dynamic is really unique and really different. I'm queer, so I think I would say 98% of my experiences have been incredibly switchy, and I'm not just talking about
within a relationship.
Yes. So it's essentially delegating tasks that each person is better at. So
is that a joint thing, or are you the one delegating?
Yeah, I do delegate, but I do the container, and it's a lot of eye contact. So when we talk about dom space or subspace, it's a headspace in which a dominant or a submissive can get into, and you'll be able to notice that their eyes will switch. There's a different tone within the eyes that when someone is in a subspace with you, and a dom's eyes will for sure switch when they're in that space. So it's really fun, and it's an interpretive dance between two people that you know, I could be bottoming or subbing, and then my eyes will switch and they'll immediately get down on their knees.
Yeah, that's fun. So within a session or playtime,
yes,
it volleys back and forth.
Yes, the entire time.
That's amazing.
With men, I think that I am significantly more dominant for, I would say, 98%, but it's a dominance that they're not used to. It doesn't look overtly dominant. So usually when I date men, which is rarely, when I'm
sorry, no luck for those suitors out there. Maybe you could get lucky.
Yes, if you are, you're very special. Special people only. But I usually meet them. They believe that they're dominant, and I
you see this all the time, right?
Yes.
And they're just not even aware.
No, they aren't, and I love that. And it's not intentional for me either, but I think I naturally I seduce into pain and I seduce into power dynamic. So I like the power play and the seduction into having someone believe that I am a bottom and believe this, and then as soon as they lay down, then I
demon angel baby.
Yes, demon angel baby. Does that answer?
Yeah.
What about you?
I am open to being submissive. I guess it's like I'm open to all experiences.
Yes.
And that's not to say I haven't tried, but I naturally just landed at, if I am in a situation, I can bottom. However, I will tend to top from the bottom.
Yes.
I don't know. Some people could say I'm bratty. I do think I'm a brat, and that can lean into definitely if I was submissive. However, whenever someone has tried to dom me, there's a lot of resistance for sure. I've been told I'm a terrible submissive. And it ends up, I naturally draw in and attract submissives on both ends of gender. It just seems like, you know, even if, like you said, they don't necessarily know it or not, or they're used to being dominant, but there is something about, there's eventually a switch or a gradual switch where they are showing more submissive tendencies. And it's not something, again, well, sometimes I purposely do it, but sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
And so I think I know I'm dominant. I can bottom. Am I a switch on the DS spectrum? TBD.
Yeah.
I do think that if I were to ever submit, it would be to a woman or a woman identifying person. That's just my intuition, but who knows?
Yeah. That's very much me.
Yeah.
I've
had partners that tease me and try to boss me around or dominate me, and I just get very frustrated. Like I'm just like, no, don't even try a start.
Oh my gosh, I love this.
But it doesn't mean I can't surrender into things in certain experiences.
Yes, I really relate to that, and I think that I came into kink through being a sub, and that trained me how to be a really great dominant. And I think that it shares a perspective. It doesn't need to be the only way that you can learn how to be a really great dominant, but I think that being a sub made me significantly more aware of how to be dominant. And I think it's the state that I feel most comfortable in, and I'm not closed off to just experience life, experience the human and what that has to offer. But
the whole human experience.
Yes. And I think that's a great way to kind of provide our audience information and giddiness on us that, yes, prodoms can explore behind the curtains without you. Did you enjoy being dommed? Like, subscribe, and add your worships in the comments. Follow us on all socials linked in the bio below.